Well, hello everybody and welcome to OAG's latest webinar. Let's get the slide deck up and I'm going to introduce you to the panel. As ever, we have John Grant, OAG's Chief Analyst. John, welcome back. New background today?
Absolutely. Do you love my new background? I painted it especially for you, but actually I'm at Cranfield University lecturing this afternoon. So there's 50 students who are going to listen to me. I think I'd rather go down a pub personally, but each to their own.
Moving on, we are delighted to be joined by Mikko Turtiainen. Hopefully I've pronounced that correctly, Mikko. It's been a while.
Extremely well.
Mikko is a past attendee of our webinars right back in those dark days of COVID. When you were working with a different company, you were with Finnair. Mikko's now sales strategy and growth lead at Condor, and we'll hear a bit more about that as we go. But welcome back, Mikko. We're delighted to have you join us today.
Hey, thank you very much. It's great to be back. It's great to see the both of you, and I really enjoyed it last time, so I'm looking forward to the next hour.
Good. Okay, let's dive in then. So we're going to talk today about the summer. It's coming rapidly. Summer season starting in a couple of weeks' time, and we've been sort of talking amongst ourselves about some of the challenges the industry is facing. How's capacity shaping up? Will we continue to see the growth in demand that we've seen in the last 12, 18 months? What's going to be the impact of the ongoing resource constraints in the industry? And there's plenty to say there. And are there tough times ahead for some carriers, in particular the ultra low cost carriers in the US? So yeah, let's get going. As ever, we've got lots of data to share with you, and hopefully some interesting insights. And feel free to just pop a question in the chat box if you'd like to ask us anything about any of the data or the deck that we share. So first up, we've got a familiar picture for those of you who join us regularly. We're just taking a look at the global capacity trends. So this big chart here shows you 2019 in black, still hanging on to that, 2023 in grey, and then 2024 year to date, and then the dotted line is the projection for the rest of the year. So high level, on the face of it, this looks like a pretty optimistic picture. We're above 2019, and we're quite a bit above last year, which is good. The summer is looking pretty healthy. Capacity globally 5.4% ahead of summer 19. Lots to be upbeat about, John, maybe?
Some things to be upbeat about, yes, definitely. The fact that we've got 9% growth plus on last year, I think, is positive. And as you pointed out, it looks like on the face of it, we're 5% up in terms of capacity compared to 19. But said it before, say it again. We need to remember that we've lost 5 years of growth in the industry, and that would probably give us about 20% more than what we see, or 15% more than what we see there now. But I think it is positive, Deirdre. Positive because we're 2.5 weeks away from the summer program, so everyone has survived, or many have survived the winter, which is always a notorious period of time. Unfortunately, we saw Lynx disappear a few weeks ago in Canada, and there's been some smaller failures elsewhere as well. And good from a sustainability and carbon emission perspective, because although we're up in terms of capacity, the actual frequency of flights is still down on 2019, only slightly, but we're seeing larger capacity per ATM. So that's good. It's good until you look underneath it and see what's causing that. And it's because we're seeing less regional flying. That regional flying, much of which was in the US, has been stopped and dropped because of resource issues, pilots, aircraft, whatever you want to say. There's issues everywhere that's affecting that. So I think on the face of it, we've done well. We're clearly coming out of a tunnel, but if it's experience is anything to go by, after you come out of one tunnel, at some point there'll be another one. But the last 3 weeks have been really good for many of the legacy carriers and some of the low-cost carriers in terms of their 23 earnings reports, record profits, pay back on debt, extreme optimism about the next summer program and the rest of 2024, record revenues. They don't tell you about the record revenue, record cost as well. But yeah, it's generally good. China beginning to gently put the throttle on a bit more international capacity, which is helping. Still got the issues about Russia overflights that are frustrating for many airlines. Price of oil is benign; it's coming down. It's pretty soft. Yep. So there's lots of really good indicators, and even for the travelling public, dare I say it, evidence of some cheaper fares.
Which is a welcome relief.
Oh, absolutely. Although, of course, the UK government, in their super efficient attacks on aviation, imposed more APD, air passenger duty, and taxation on airlines for travel last week.
For those who could afford to fly in the premium cabins, that's a real worry.
Well, it must be.
It's a serious issue, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a serious issue. I mean, the UK is the most taxed aviation market, apart from, I think it's some obscure point in West Africa. So lots going on. Greater government attempts at greenwashing by imposing rules that really don't matter to airlines. It's a fascinating time, I think.
Okay, and we're seeing, just back to the deck for a minute, we're seeing that slight disconnect that we've all grown used to between domestic and international growth rates. Domestic, of course, boosted by strong growth in India and China, and we'll see some regional breakdowns and country breakdowns shortly. And international still lagging, partly due to a lack of recovery against 2019, primarily from China outbound. I mentioned we'd talk about the regional picture. Here it is. We've just taken a look at regional capacity for the summer season for this summer, last summer, and summer 2019, and it's a mixed bag. I guess relative to recent years, it's a pretty good picture. Notwithstanding your point, John, about if the pandemic hadn't happened, we'd have been looking at much higher growth rates over that 4-year period. But yeah, interesting to see. And remember, this is total, so this is domestic and international. Pretty punchy growth here in North America, and we'll dive into some of that soon. Michael, you'll have some views on that, I'm sure. And strong growth continuing in Latin America, and that's been a feature throughout, hasn't it? As I guess the market right across the continent continues to mature.
Latin America was very strong through the pandemic, as we know. A couple of big domestic markets, Colombia, Brazil, and a lot of medical traffic from Colombia up to Florida for COVID vaccinations for a period of time, which was an interesting niche segment. But if you look at those averages in terms of capacity growth, I think what is interesting is the industry's net operating margin in 2023 across all of the airlines around the world, and there were some stellar performances, was about 4%. So it's still an extremely marginal business. And when you suddenly put 5% capacity back into the market that wasn't there, and you put 10% in Latin America, if the market doesn't respond, then airlines begin to play the revenue management game and try and stimulate demand and all of these sort of things. And when you do that, of course, it's a very fine line before that 4% industry margin becomes less. And it always, and it'll be interesting, it always surprises me how small a proportion of the world's 710 airlines that are flying this week are actually profitable. Were profitable in 2023, and more importantly, are profitable over an economic cycle. of 5 or 10 years. I think that's the great challenge. We get excited about 1 year, 2 years of extreme profit, and suddenly crisis occurs, the price of fuel escalates, there's a political incident somewhere, or we have issues with aircraft resources, although that can be a blessing in disguise, and you end up with that margin being eroded again. And we've got to be really careful about how we interpret the data and what we see in the information.
Yeah, I think capacity discipline has gone, hasn't it, for now, in certainly in some of the bigger markets. And I know, Miko, we talked yesterday, didn't we, about you're upbeat about the North American market and the transatlantic market and its potential, and the reports that we've seen of airline trading results and investor relations presentations are all, some cautiously, some not so cautiously upbeat about 2024. Mostly, there are one or two who are, there are some warning flags, and we'll maybe talk a bit about those as we go. So, yeah, interesting. And we're not talking about the elephant in the room, really, are we? Which is Europe right now. It becomes evident when we look at the next slide, I think, really what is going on. If we look at country level, and this is quite a busy slide, so bear with us. We've got international and domestic capacity by some of the biggest countries. And we've got those countries that are most recovered in the context of summer 24 over summer 2019, and those who are least. And it should not really be a surprise to anybody to see the likes of Germany languishing right at the bottom there in terms of what is going on in the domestic market. France, not quite as bad, but also behind. And the UK also still not fully back. And a smattering of Southeast Asian countries in here too.
It's a real mixed bag, isn't it? You look at some of these, and you look at the domestics, and Colombia. Well, geographically, if you've ever been to Colombia, the only way to really get from any of the big cities is by air, and there's always growth taking place there, and there may well be subsequent reductions in capacity at some point, because that's what always happens. Chinese domestic capacity, I think this is interesting because this is one of the factors that's preventing Chinese international growth, is that the Chinese airlines operate more domestic capacity than they are international, and are reluctant to flip back to where they were pre-pandemic. India has been on a growth drive, as we know. Spain is big, similar issues as Colombia, big geographic distances. Very few of us can walk on water, so points like India, points like the Balearics and the Canary Islands, it's the only way to reach them. So it's interesting. Then if you look at the international markets, Deirdre, and put the slide back up, I think that's quite interesting, because you see Greece has benefited so much from its proactive approach to the pandemic, and is even now seeing the shoulder periods stretch out each year, so that there's more year-round demand than traditionally was. The story of the Greek hotelier shutting up in October is no longer true.
And that's the ultimate for a leisure-based destination, isn't it?
That's what they want. Well, that's what they say they want.
Build the shoulders.
When they have it, they probably think, I'd rather have the ability to close my hotel in October. I've got to work all year now. The Saudi Arabian one is a bit of, it looks positive. 26% growth in international capacity. Let's not forget they've got this mammoth air connectivity program underway. They're signing up airlines from all over the world to start flying there. I've seen some more low-cost airlines in Germany launch or announce services to Jeddah in the last couple of weeks. So you have to wonder if are they chasing the money, or are they chasing the market, or are they going to create a market to Jeddah? I don't know. Qatar is just Qatar Airways PLC and their aspirations for a hub. That's interesting in itself. You look at 3 of those international top 6, Saudi Arabia, Qatar and Turkey, and indeed the UAE, they are all going to be squabbling and fighting for the international connecting passenger over the next 5 and 10 years. Accepting, of course, Sir Tim Clark's comment that Boeing are in the last chance saloon again. You know, that is a lot of capacity to be putting in the market when a lot of that traffic is completely price predicated and will move based on what we see in terms of price and product offering. So that's fascinating.
And then Nico, that's what you're hoping for, isn't it?
It is.
You know, that you can tap into that market that wants to fly direct year round for premium leisure destinations.
This is I love looking at these numbers and still go maybe back to what John was saying on the previous slide about how different type of comments are coming out, with the majority being showing confidence for this summer, but a few also showing some caution. And I think this summarized the discussions that I've had with travel agencies and the trade in North America. So I am director of sales for Condor for the Americas, with a lot of the focus being on the US and Canada. And the exciting journey that Condor is on, it comes from I would say 2 elements. One is new aircraft. So during the very darkest of the pandemic, Condor made the decision to invest in new fleet. And we're at 17 brand new Airbus 330 Neos right now. So we're, as of pretty much yesterday or the beginning of March, we're flying a complete Neo operation over the Atlantic. And it's fantastic to be offering a new aircraft. And that aircraft does have that 94 premium seats. So 30 business, 64 premium economy, and 216 in economy. And this really requires a different approach for us in the U.S. market, and in that sense, it's exciting to see the growth numbers that you were showing, which Condor is really shattering in that sense. That 2023 we had a record year in regards to capacity, and this year we're adding about 50% capacity into the market between Frankfurt and the U.S. and Canada. So we're really adding a lot of seats, and in that sense, I get asked the question from our HQ many times that what is the confidence of the U.S. market right now? And I think John also mentioned it well, that some softness in regards to prices you can see in the market. But I would still say that the elements that I'm seeing, being at ITB Berlin last week and just hearing what the chatter was there in regards to how business is looking, I would say it was extremely positive. I didn't really have any conversations that would have brought up any concerns. I think sales, it might be a little bit slower in the sense of where we were last year versus where we are this year. I think we still have some ways to go, but I am still very confident in regards to how summer 2024 will go. But definitely more discussions around the summer than there were last year at this point in time, looking at summer 23.
And I think in some ways it's almost like a paradox that I think the long haul confidence is probably better than the short haul confidence.
Yeah.
And particularly in the US market, I think, that's beginning to become a bit crystal clear. A couple of people have, commented already about, it's not just the airlines, it's about the total travel products and the total cost of travel, and hotel cost, particularly in Europe, particularly in US and Caribbean. Someone described it as, I think it was Andy said, they're exploding compared to previous years. Well, I can confirm that my credit card exploded ago. And the product isn't any better. But, this is the reality of the world we're going to live in, and we're going to have to live in for a long time. Salaries have increased. The cost of deliveries, the cost of product, everything that you see in a hotel and indeed in an airline is we're
losing you a little bit, John.
Sorry?
Maybe
we were losing you. You were breaking up a little bit there, but I think we got the gist of what you were saying.
Maybe on the price aspect, I can say that I'm actually really enjoying the present moment with Condor. That when you look at the destinations and the capacity that we're showing Greece and Italy and these very traditional leisure destinations for the U.S. and Canadian market, also increasing capacity, I can also confirm that we're seeing similar growth to these destinations in regards to bookings out of the U.S. and Canada. Italy is extremely strong for us. Looking at next summer, and Greece is also in that sense very strong. What Condor brings, as you talk about the overall package, and are we hitting that ceiling yet? Condor pricing in the market, as we're not part of any alliance or joint business, it also allows us to be more aggressive, be more competitive with the flight portion of that complete package that the holidaymaker is making, and that's an exciting element to also be able to compete on price, where we have, I would say, one of the best products over the Atlantic with the brand new Neos, and I've been quoted many times on saying that what Condor is offering for summer 2024 for travel from the US and Canada into Europe, it's the best product to value proposition that's in the market when traveling into Europe. But I do see the exact same things that you're talking about in regards to capacity increases in Europe, where we see the same flows going there, and the price is maybe a bit more under the microscope going into 2024 than when we were going into summer 2023.
I mean, I think, I know Delta is starting a Naples service on a seasonal basis.
Let me show you my here's my slide on that. So we've got 27 new transatlantic routes this summer, and Naples is a feature. So it's Palermo.
And who do I thank for this one? Because I also see our new route, so being the first ever airline to fly nonstop from San Antonio into Frankfurt. So I appreciate picking that one up.
That's all right. That's what happens when you load. That's what happens when you load your schedules with OAG. You see, they can be used by everyone, including us. But the important thing is, there are a number of factors that are allowing this, because it clearly seems to be a US dollar strength, a purchasing power that has continued from last year and continues into this year. Either that, or it's US residents trying to get away from the election, which has still got 8 months to run, or it's these new destinations that people are going to, and we haven't got it on here because it's not in Europe, but who would ever have thought that there would be a Newark Marrakesh service for a seasonal summer program, which is what United are doing this summer. And all of these are benefiting from next generation aircraft, or some of them are certainly benefiting from next generation aircraft. And of course, we've got that play that's taking place in Iceland about connecting traffic, once again, doing something that we've seen others do as well. So there's a lot going on at the moment that makes it really, really busy and really exciting.
I think it's encouraging, isn't it, that we're seeing the return of, and I sort of slightly hesitate to call them secondary destinations or secondary cities.
Here too.
You told us yesterday, Miko, I think that San Antonio is in the top 10 US cities by population. So by no stretch of the imagination is it small, and secondary or tier 2 kind of implies that. But I think it's so encouraging to see that connectivity is coming back. Notwithstanding we're still route on route total numbers down on 2019, but actually there's a drive in this particular market, isn't there, to connect places where there are markets that really want to travel. And it's two-way. It's not all Americans coming to Europe, is it? There's a strong market in both directions.
I think there is, Deirdre, and that goes to a couple of questions that have been asked actually by people who are listening in. So Todd Gardner has asked us, do we see any reduction in demand because of air travel from inflation or higher interest rates? And I think the answer to that is absolutely not.
Oh.
On the contrary, a couple of months ago, we had someone on from Hopper, their chief economist, you may remember, who was telling us that, you know, people are making conscious decisions not to purchase houses, but to dive into their savings and their deposits and take bucket list travel. So that's one example. And Helene has asked, are we seeing any people stop traveling because of perceived sustainability issues? Again, I don't really think that has occurred yet. It might be on the very, very margin. But I don't think people are consciously saying, you know, I'm going to take a road trip, and indeed a road trip could burn more carbon emissions anyway. So the market is just.
I think we're seeing that in Europe, and some of that is being driven by government action in terms of restricting domestic travel. We're seeing that in Germany, as we said, in Spain, in France. But I think the point that Helene made is that this is not yet a feature, I think, of travel in the US yet. I think it's a much more price demand driven market there, perhaps because of geography, and therein lies the challenge for very big domestic markets where there will always be a need for air connectivity.
And maybe one comment still to Todd's question or comment on is travel curtailing due to inflation and higher interest rates and so on. I did a 3-year stint with revenue management where it's all about data, it's all about history, it's about analyzing forecasts and trends and trying to optimize the passenger flows in different price groups for the next 365 days. So it's all about kind of trying to read the future and how can we optimize revenues per flight or per O&D. And I think that coming out of COVID, 2023, you know, we talked about revenge travel and so on, and how is that trend going to go? And I think, you know, to John's point, I think last year 4% margin, you know, it's always been a low margin industry. I'd say, you know, some of these legacy airlines got it right with the huge earnings that they're, you know, posting. Now we're going into 2024, and I think a lot of revenue management teams are also scratching their head that how's the trend going to be this year? Is the booking trend going to be as steep? Is it going to be as long? Is it because we're kind of everyone's kind of saying that 2024 revenge travel is kind of out now. So now we're kind of into a more normal rationale for travel, be it then I want to go on a holiday, I want to relax, I want to see my family and friends, but it's not just that pure revenge travel that we saw last year really bursting out. So I think this is also an interesting element that kind of goes to Todd's point that how is that passenger demand going to come and how do airlines then get it right in regards to the pricing, where you already see some airlines coming in with lower prices, you see others holding tight with the high prices. It's a fascinating situation to be, isn't it?
Yeah, a nice segue into a little snapshot of forward bookings from OAG's traffic analyzer database on some of the key transatlantic routes. So we've got Heathrow JFK, Charles de Gaulle JFK, Heathrow Los Angeles, and Heathrow Toronto, just by virtue of those being the biggest passenger volume transatlantic routes. And so what we're showing here is as of March 2023, the grey line was looking forward into what forward bookings were in by month. And then as of now, March 2024, the yellow bars are the equivalent data for this year. So that sort of tells me that actually the position isn't as strong as it was at this point last year. And there's still, you know, are we seeing this an increasing trend to people holding off because the prices might come down, because we're all conditioned to think that, you know, when we're booking a holiday in years gone by, sometimes you benefited from that. Are we just seeing uncertainty still about the economy and about the position, and people holding back from booking travel? I think it's interesting to.
I think there's all sorts of things at play here. So firstly, let's not forget this time last year, the market and certain airlines still had travel vouchers that have from the pandemic that had to be
Yeah.
used by the end of 2023. So that could well be an element there. Another factor, which I think, there is undoubtedly playing on the consumer's mind, is, to Todd's point, you look at an airfare and you think, oh, that's, it's the same as last year. And then you look at a hotel and you think, wow, I'm not paying that £300 a night. I'll hold off and see what happens in the next couple of months, because it can't go any higher, can it?
And that's the risk, isn't it? That's the risk. We've all been burned.
That is the absolute risk. But I think there's a large part of that playing in this whole thing. And in all of this, to Miko's point, those revenue managers at some point are going to get nervy and say, do we go for volume and do we let the price slip a bit? And it's interesting when you go on Google Flights, which I think is, a great search tool. They're a customer of OAG, so I thought I'd say that anyway. But if you look at their fare quotes, you actually see it says, there's a little bar that says higher or lower than the average for this time of year, and it's beginning to go towards the lower than average. And I think that's a telling sign of what's happening out there.
And you do have a very busy summer. If you look at, travel from North America to Europe, or just Europe as a destination in general, you have the Olympics. You also then have the European Championships in regards to football or soccer being played in Germany. So, I mean, there's big events that are happening. And it's going to be interesting to see, as airlines usually do, look at events. And these are times when you try and yield up, because you have foreseen demand that should be coming in. But this it's another element to the whole discussion on how summer is going to go.
And, in our experience, every time the Olympics come around, or a big sporting event come around, we're sort of asked that question about what's the Olympic effect. And the reality is, there is not a big Olympic effect in the year that the Olympics happen or the big sporting events happen. Because what sometimes happens is people choose not to travel. They might have been planning a trip to France or Paris this year, and they think, prices are going to be crazy. It's going to be rammed. Everybody's going to be there for the Olympics, and maybe we'll go next year. And typically, you then see, a spike the year after. And some of that is from pent up demand. Some of that is from people seeing the destination. Not that France doesn't need a whole lot of publicity, being the biggest international tourism market. Still the top country, I think, for international travel. But you do get that effect of people seeing a country showcased on TV, and they think, oh yeah, we'll go there next year.
But it will be interesting. It will be interesting to see how the satellite countries and locations to Paris perform this summer, given, we saw last year at the Qatar World Cup, where there was an air bridge to Dubai and most people stayed in Dubai and came in for the day. Is anyone brave enough to stay in London and go across or through to Paris for a day trip? Is anyone brave enough to come up on the TGV from south of France or other big French cities where accommodation cost will be a lot lower? Who knows? I mean, it's the great unknown.
I think there'll be people doing all sorts of those things all over, not least the football, the UEFA thing as well. So yeah, I think we'll see all those kind of journeys and anecdotal stories about people want to be there.
And being a hardcore airline industry professional, I'm at that 25 years about in the industry, so I've seen about 6 Olympics, if my math's kind of keeping up. But from the Olympics that I've seen, I think airlines who have the nonstop into that country, and especially national carriers, the revenue management theory just kicks in. That huge event, you have to optimize the flights in a completely different way than we would in the normal summer, and that actually, I've seen that it's caused situations where all of a sudden hasn't gone as well as it was hoped for. So it's interesting just to see that Olympic element, and I think you, Deidre, said it very well, that at times, when you get closer to the Olympics, all of a sudden you see, prices go down because that demand isn't matching those expectations. But I think it's interesting always to follow as an working with the airlines on how airlines actually implement their strategies around big events, and it's a every year is a learning curve in that sense. Also, just seeing. So we have Paris coming up this year, so I'll be watching how Air France is doing their pricing.
It's I think one of the interesting things to me is those, and the cynic in me thinks that the national airline has to only look for full fare traffic because it's given away half the aircraft free of charge to International Olympic Committee members as part of the overall sponsorship package that's been negotiated. So they have no choice, Miko.
I'm sure they'll all be hopping on the train from Geneva anyway. So
maybe
making sustainable choices about their
private jets,
their travel.
And I'm just throwing it out there. Frankfurt is on that same continent, so Condor to Frankfurt might be an option for some.
It might well be.
It certainly is. Okay, let's change tack a little now. We had put together a slide on LCCs and the sort of increasing market share growth that we're seeing in different parts of the world. Now, globally, this summer, it's looking like LCCs will operate 35% of capacity, up from 31% in 2019. So we're seeing that continued development of LCCs. And it's really easy in the, in Europe and North America to sort of be in the zone of thinking that the LCC market penetration is mature and how much scope for growth is there, but actually it's still happening. We took a look at, so globally across each region, this is the share in this year, but actually who is seeing the most increase over 2019 to the summer. Western Europe continues to see growth driven, of course, by Ryanair and Wizz primarily. We're seeing a similar picture across Eastern Europe. We're seeing strong growth in North Africa as we've got sort of penetration into those markets that can be served from Europe. And Central America and the Caribbean are also targets for US low-cost carriers, aren't they? Going into these markets.
It's fascinating. I was pulling some data yesterday for someone, and intra-Western Europe summer capacity this year, Ryanair will be the market leader with 16.4% of all capacity. Followed by EasyJet, who just got 10%. So Ryanair have got a 50% charge on all of their competitors. These two airlines continue to grow and open new markets. And in some ways that leads to the point about North Africa's quite considerable growth in 15 percentage points, because Ryanair have got access to cabotage and domestic services in Morocco, because they've started and got an AOC, and they're going to put, I think it's 3 or 4 aircraft in Morocco. That is the death of domestic services from any other airline in Morocco, and it is going to disrupt the market big time. Probably not going to hit Royal Air Morocco and their excellent Casablanca hub, but this is a replication of what happened in Malta when the Maltese government allowed Ryanair and AOC and to start Air Malta Ryanair. And basically, they wiped Air Malta out. And to the question that's just been asked, the reason we can see what has happened is because Air Malta, legacy airline, been around for many, many years. Their cost base was just too high. So what does the government have to do? It has to restart the airline with a lower cost base and a lower network. and it's at the mercy of Ryanair and Ryanair's commitment to that island and other low-cost carriers. And there are, I think low-cost airlines have done a great job, and they offer excellent product, but we need to be really, really careful about and think about the laws of unintended consequences when you allow some of these airlines into your market. And
I think particularly if you're a geographically isolated or peripheral market,
yeah, absolutely, you're an island
where daily connectivity, as in your business passenger can leave in the morning, go and do some business somewhere else in Europe or wherever, and come back the same day, is critical. And that's just not the LCC model. In some markets, it works well in some places, but not for everybody, and that's the danger, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the shame, isn't it, really, in the big scheme of things. And we talk about single market, European connectivity. The European Commission want to encourage connectivity to the periphery of the European Union, and that's from places in Norway at the very top to down into the most southerly points in Europe. And yet LCCs will be there in the summer, particularly if it's a leisure destination. But come the 1st of November, they may stay, but their frequency will be reduced significantly, or they may walk away from the market until next summer, leaving it to someone else to try and maintain the lifeline services.
So roll on those shoulder seasons, getting busier, and more people, wanting to travel off season because it's too hot to travel at the high point of summer. I'm still scarred from being in the south of Europe last summer, where it was like an oven. Maybe there's a small advantage there.
Well, and here is an interesting. I read an article at the weekend, and they were extolling the virtues of skiing in Scandinavia this winter, because there is snow, and there is nowhere near the normal levels of snow we're seeing in southern Europe and in the Alps this year. So suddenly, the really keen ski season type traveller has got to start looking to the Nordic region for his week's holiday in February. It's a very different, very, very different situation.
Okay, let's go back across the Atlantic, and we wanted to look at what was happening in the US domestic market. We were seeing strong LCC growth there in Central America and the Caribbean, and that's driven in large part by US low-cost carriers and mainline carriers. There's some interesting stats. So we took a look at TSA data. It's been a while since we did that, but that's showing upbeat levels of throughput compared to 2019. There's more of a mixed picture when we look at straight capacity for the summer season, though. And we've taken two sort of snapshots here. We've got summer 24 over summer 23. We don't need to talk about 2019 in this context because this is a market that is past that level. But we also wanted to take a look at quarter two for both years as well, really to just sort of sense check, I guess, what we were seeing in some of these. Now, there's a kind of consistent picture, isn't there, across United, Delta and American, across the big guys, 7% for both United and Delta year over year, American a bit higher, a bit more optimism perhaps there. Southwest are really hurting, aren't they, because of aircraft delivery issues. That's really what's driving their inability to add more capacity, isn't it?
It is, and that's, well, we could talk about this forever, couldn't we? The whole aircraft resource issue and what's going on at the moment. But it does make it difficult. I mean, I read overnight Delta are suspending all recruitment for pilots because they have no assurances about aircraft deliveries, so they can't plan ahead. we've been wondering what's going to happen in the whole world of pilot recruitment, because, you know, we have a severe shortage expected by 2025, maybe 27. And if that is the case, if we're temporarily suspending recruitment now, that's going to bite us further down the journey as we get to 2027 and onwards. So, yeah, I think, you know, it's very difficult for the US airlines domestically to plan, and yet they need to. And, you know, that goes back to the market softness. If you haven't got the product on the shelves, you're not going to sell what's out there.
Yeah.
Or what you need to sell.
I have to say that was a really good summary in one picture or one slide on how the U.S. market looks. Who's growing, who's not, who has really big challenges with Southwest in regards to the big dip in regards to capacity that they have. It's a fantastic shot. Just kind of reflecting on what you just mentioned in regards to the challenges, be it crews or pilots or so on. If I look at the past 2 years on Condor, so we started our refleeting process with the new NEOs in December 22. We've been pretty much receiving a new wide body on average about once a month. So we're at 17 brand new wide bodies now. We've been able to get rid of all of the 767s as well as some of the 330-200s that we had in use. So now we're a NEO family for our wide bodies. We start the narrow bodies now. 2023 was a really big year of transition, and I can sense some of the pain that the other airlines are feeling in regards to this, because I think a transition, it's always tough, always finding the crews and having to educate the crews through trainings and so on. It's a really intense process for an airline. But I'm happy looking back that for Condor, for us to be in this situation today where we're pretty much on our timeline for wide body deliveries from Airbus. I'm knocking on wood and I have a wide smile on our face to be in this situation where I can reflect that we have a consistent product over the Atlantic with brand new NEOs on every single flight and route that we fly. And it's a fantastic situation to be at. And now we're starting the same process with the narrow bodies, and let's see how this goes. But at least for the wide body side, I think we'd fared relatively well in comparison to what you were, John, saying.
Yeah, I think the wide body impact has perhaps not been as significant as in the narrow bodied fleets.
Yeah.
But here's some sensational numbers that I worked out this morning on a train. People are telling us that there's about 400 aircraft in the world that could be flying but can't because of MRO requirements, and that's on a global basis. If you then extrapolate that out, 180 seats, average of three round trips per day, 80% load factor, 365 days. You don't need to do the maths, Miko. I'll do it for you. That's 126 million seats that should have been in the market this year that are not. Multiply that by an average of probably a $90, $100 one-way airfare net. We're talking billions that are currently being poured down the drain by the inability to put these aircraft through their necessary checks and get them back on the production line. So, it might have been a really good year for the airline industry. And I'm sure there's some really interesting discussions about compensation that are taking place between the airlines. Although publicly, they're all reassuring everyone about, complete faith in Boeing. Although, interestingly, Michael O'Leary at his earnings report 6 weeks ago had complete faith in them. 3 weeks ago, he said they need to get their act together. Now,
what's he going to be saying this week then?
Yeah, that's a change of tone. But, we're talking really big money here. And lots of volume that is being left on the table. And this isn't an industry that, it survives on scraps. It can't leave them on the table.
And, I think there's the soundbite right there. I think the noise that creates for an airline in terms of all of the other factors that you're juggling, the uncertainty about MRO, when you put an aircraft,
the wasted energy,
when's it coming back, and how are your is to fill the gaps, and compounded by the fact that you might have order order delays as well. You're in a good spot, Miko. You're
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
You hear stories of airlines who are now sending their engineers to Seattle to oversee the Boeing production process. I mean, there are guys who've turned up in Seattle like, where am I? This isn't where I expected to be. I'm here for the next 6 months in a hotel room or an Airbnb that we can get in time to make sure my aircraft are delivered on time. But the bigger picture, we talk about sustainability, we talk about carbon emissions. These engineers should be looking and addressing those types of issues rather than worrying about, is that bolt in the right place, and checking the quality of delivery of work they've paid for and is being delivered to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so frustrating.
So let's come back to the deck. So that question we kind of asked at the outset, are there challenging times ahead for low-cost carriers? We saw a couple of slides earlier, didn't we, that LCC growth is upbeat, strong, certainly internationally. There's perhaps a bit of a lag domestically in the US, although we think that Spirit aren't in quite as bad a position as it might appear from looking at the summer. We suspect that might be a filing issue. They've not fully filed their summer schedules yet. But even so, Southwest at 20 to 25% down, JetBlue 12 to 14% down. What's coming for the summer? We took a look at share price over the last year. On the left, we've got the big mainline carriers in the US. Then we've got Southwest and JetBlue languishing in the middle here. And then we've got the ultra, I was going to say the ultras, and that's a really bad term in football parlance, so I'm not going to say that. The ultra LCCs on the right here. And I suppose we were a little surprised, John, weren't we? It's fair to say when we looked at this. I mean, there's a story happening obviously here for Spirit. But actually, I think we instinctively perhaps thought we might see a more upbeat performance on the left side than we're actually seeing.
So here is an industry
we're doing
returning record dividends to shareholders, telling everyone it's extremely profitable, particularly those big three US carriers, and that the outlook for the next couple of years looks pretty good. Be it deliberate or by accident, we've seen some capacity growth, but it's not going to be as big as they thought it was going to be. We hear that the legacy guys are performing better than the low-cost carriers or some of the low-cost carriers in the domestic market, and yet the stock price isn't moving. And if we put the same slide up for the European big carriers, we'd see a very similar message across all of them over the last 12 months. Improvements in performance, outputs, dividends for some, except IAG is still not paying a dividend, except to their CEO and others, of course, in the senior management team. It's a bit of a paradox as to why the investment community, and I don't know the answer, why the investment community does not see the value in airline stocks at the moment. Is it because
a hangover from COVID? Is it
the political and geopolitical uncertainties that they see around the world? Is it the fact that as an industry we've not been very clever in our PR and we've had some big issues, with some major aircraft manufacturers? Is it that we're not making enough progress on carbon emissions? What is it? Is it a dirty dirty stock to hold at the moment in the context of the environment? I don't know, but we're clearly not delivering the value that the investment communities would like to see. Why?
I think that's a great question, and I was waiting for you to continue and say that.
Sorry. Well, I'm looking down in the bottom right-hand corner to see if anyone's got the answer.
Yeah, anyone? Anyone out there in the audience want to hazard a guess?
There are so many paradoxes about what we're seeing compared to where the market should be.
I think it's uncertainty. I think there's just too much uncertainty about resource constraints, about the economic situation and geopolitics. I think it's the combination of those three things in a sort of a vortex that just, you know, isn't we're too close to in everybody's memory what happened in the last 4 years.
But in an ironic environment of increased uncertainty, some of the greatest possible returns that we've seen in this industry, you know, yeah, it just doesn't stack up somewhere, does it?
Yeah.
But then, you know, as someone said many years ago, when the Wright brothers proved that flight was possible, someone should have shot the airplane down.
And it might be, John, you know, you need a couple of good years under the belt. That maybe, you know, to everyone's point, we are still too close with the uncertainty that's out there, be it from the geopolitical or be it from other areas, or be it that 4% margin. You know, are these elements combined? Do we need a couple of years for that investment community to really start to kind of get excited around around airlines, or certain airlines, for example?
And I think you know, I think the 4% is, of course, this average, and you know, there's nothing worse than an average. And there are some stellar stats, as well as those that underperform.
Okay, last slide, and we're nearly got just under 5 minutes left. We've probably covered most of these points, really, which is just about acknowledging the turbulence really that's happening. Bad analogy, I know, in the industry, that, you know, yes, we're upbeat and we're optimistic, and there are record profits, but there's always a but, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, these are just some of the headlines: fewer aircraft being delivered than expected, impact of the plug issue, 150 million hit for Alaska Airlines. They can't afford that type of hit at the best of times. You know, this is not good news for them. Lufthansa, you know, nowhere near the capacity they were offering in 2019, but very skillfully still managing to, you know, produce good profits. And maybe that's a testament to the way they've approached the market. IAG's record profits, you know, I think most of the major airlines will be returning better than expected Q1 results. Maybe that will give us the confidence and that extra spurt of enthusiasm and upbeat thinking. We've not had any significant long-term-ish 4 or 5 day operational disruption anywhere in the world for weather.
Oh, don't tempt fate.
Well, it might happen in Scotland now, but, you know, touching wood, we're past the first of it. The price of oil has been particularly low relative to other years through this first quarter. We've not got the capacity we wanted, but we know what capacity we have, and we can work with that constraint. So if we put together, and you look at Heathrow's February traffic numbers they issued yesterday, 3% higher than any previous results that they've put forward, and other airports are rippling out their results and are showing similar numbers. You know, it's been a better than expected Q1 2024. And we're going to have a couple of days of Easter, of course, at the end of this month, that will give us a bit more
bonus. Yeah. Miko, any final thoughts, observations from you?
Yeah. Again, Condor's exciting journey. I have a lot of confidence in this year, in 2024. I think it will be a good year in that sense, even though we might face a few bumps along the way, but I think it will be a good year. If you haven't had a look, have a look at Condor's, you know, livery and our new brand visuals. All of our aircrafts come in different colored stripes, and if nothing else, it will definitely bring a big smile to your face. It's one of the funnest brands that are out there, and I've been saying, just trust the stripes. So maybe that's a good point for me to end on. But thank you very much for having me.
No, Miko, I think that's a brilliant thing to say at the end. Trust the stripes, because I need to trust the stripes to score at least 5 goals against Roma tomorrow night.
I knew we'd get a football reference in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think let's on that note, let's wrap it up there. Thank you both for your contributions and interesting insights.
Thank you very
Um,
much.
as we've said in the comments, everybody who registered for the webinar will get a copy of the slides and a recording of our discussion later on today. Thanks again for listening in. We really appreciate it, and we'll be back again next month, talking possibly about a bit of a deeper look into Europe and how markets are faring there. But watch this space. We'll let you know soon what that topic will be. Thanks everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.